Hi, everyone. Welcome back to costumeco. Happy Easter if you're celebrating, to all of my friends out there who are celebrating today. And I have a wonderful guest. He is coming in from, you're coming in from BC. Are you in Vancouver?
I'm in Vancouver.
Yes. So my guest today is Dean Eilertson. He's got beautiful weather. I actually have beautiful weather today. I'm in Toronto, Canada. So we're both Canucks coming into you today. And Dean is wearing some Shogun swag to sort of tie into our theme of our show today. So thanks everyone for joining us and taking the time out from your day. So Dean, welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's great to be back.
I'm really glad to have you back.
Things have happened since we last talked.
Absolutely. I was hoping I didn't scare you off last time. So, well, when I had you last time, the show hadn't actually aired. Shogun hadn't aired. We were in anticipation of the show, and of course, I was very, very excited. I've been talking about the show. Carlos was teasing me. He's the costume designer that I've been talking about the show for like a year now. But for you, actually, the show I think has. I mean, you haven't even been working on the show for ages. So, how long has it been since you actually were working on the show?
Oh, we finished up end of June 2022.
Yeah,
I
and then with
started the show in 2021.
So yeah, there's been quite a gap, and I guess with the actor strike and everything, that kind of set things back a little bit. But anyway, so before we kind of get into Shogun, and as you can see, we have the banner up there. I'm just going to get Dean. Dean, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? I know we had you on before, but for people who weren't here, maybe you can just share with us who you are and all that.
Well, my name's on the screen, Dean Eilertson, and I'm the property master of Shogun. That is what I do as a living, as self-employed property master. And whether it's working with Disney effects or Netflix or whatever other studio, I bounce around. And part of the job, which is the most demanding, is being flexible enough as things change, as subjects change. I went from Atom Project, where we were time traveling, onto Shogun to start prep on Shogun, for 1594, in a period that was really hard to research, and then came right off of that onto Tron, which is now 2028, modern day. Continuing a series of from Tron Legacy and stuff. So that's one tool that is really important in my world, is the research, and I pride myself in the research. It's easy enough to do paint by numbers, what I call, is written on the script, and you don't think any further beyond it. But if you really apply yourself and get into it, there's a lot of depth you can bring and offer to the characters, and they look to us for that in terms of developing themselves as a personality, as their character, what they want to do. I spent a lot of time with Cosmos on Shogun, talking about a lot of things like navigation and his pistols and how to speed load them, and just things like that carry on. Okay, so technically, props is anything handled by an actor on screen. And that can be a pretty broad term when you look at it and you start looking at some of the things you see on Shogun and the things that we had to handle in the show. If it was calligraphy, the horses, building of the boats, food scenes, weddings, funerals.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, so is it anything like you're holding or sitting in or sitting on? Like where is it, like, say, prop versus like furniture or a set decoration, that type of thing, for people who don't know, including myself?
You can define it that way, but really with Shogun and working with Lisa and Jonathan Lancaster, they were the decorators. We were in the same warehouse and we were doing the same job. We were amassing a massive amount of material, props and set dressing that we needed for the show. And we had different sources, different ways of getting it. And at early days, we were just, if there was a bolt of some silk or whatever, and it didn't matter if Carlos was going to use it or Setek was going to use it or whatever, you got it. Or an armrest or something you find, because we were on auction sites and things were coming up and being sold, and we were competing against other people bidding against it. So it was really, for a long time, months and months of just trying to amass what you could and help each other out.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we get more into Shogun, because someone might be on here who is like, I would love to do what Dean is doing for a living. So, like, how did you get started? And do you have any advice for someone who'd want to get started in working in props?
Well, my background is fine arts, and then later on, I did grad studies in architecture, as a mature student. And generally, I tell people the more you have in terms of tools to work with before you even start considering doing our job, the better equipped you're going to be going into it. And research is one of them. If you do a master's degree in fine arts or in architecture or whatever, and you do your research, it's a tool that becomes so valuable. And that's one of them. Or a trade. I was a scenic carpenter for 10 years to begin with. I had a shop in Montreal, and we built scenery, but you're given a trade, and now you have skills that you can do with your hands, and you start to understand reading drawings, and you understand building, and building has evolved over the time that I've been in this business, from making things carving out of medite or fiberglass or whatever, to nowadays we're 3D printing, or we're using real materials on CNC machines and getting into complex 3D files that then we share with visual effects for post-production. So the job has evolved, and I think my first film was called Pinball Summer, and that was in Montreal in 1976.
Was that okay? Was that a feature film or a TV show?
It was we'll call it a feature film.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was born in Montreal, but I would have moved by then. So I don't know that I saw it.
76. Yeah, you probably didn't. I think the working title was Pinball Summer. I think it came out in the theaters called Pickup Summer or something like that. It was pretty tacky.
It sounds fun though. It's
Yeah.
like there's actually like Meatballs. Remember Meatballs?
Yeah.
I actually like that movie.
I mean, what really, I look back on it so much, is Montreal was a different environment for making films. One, there were no unions, so you were truly self-employed. Two, there was a milieu on the plateau where I had a place where, the camera operator or a art director, we all lived in the same neighborhood. And we would work on these shows. Some were low budget and other ones not so low. But, in that day you shot things on film, and at night you went to see dailies or rushes from the day before. And you were in a room with the director and actors and the director of photography, and there was discussion, and you really started to learn what your job was and what other people's jobs were. And you lived it and breathed it. And once you were on a show, it was like 24/7. That's what you were doing. And when you're young, that's a lot of fun. Because you
absolutely. I think my first Canadian film I ever saw was Rabid, David Cronenberg.
Yeah.
Marilyn, the porn star, was in that. I can't remember her name. Sorry, Marilyn Chambers, I think. That was shot in Montreal, I believe. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit. Well, first off, I want to congratulate you on the success of Shogun, because when I first had you on here, the show hadn't actually aired. You had told me that you had seen a little bit of the show and it looked very good. Like, because I was saying, oh, how does it look? The trailer looks dark, but you're like, no, it's not actually, and absolutely correct, because, there's a lot of film color grading that they do and everything feels dark. So it doesn't feel like that at all. But I want to congratulate you. I mean, you must be so, I'm assuming maybe not, that you're excited at the success of the show. How are you feeling about it?
It's funny. Who did I email the other day? Somebody with that. Oh, Michael, the producer from VFX. Now he's on Instagram, and finally being able to surface. He looks like he's aged. I think he did a real hard job in post-production. And he asked me, how are you enjoying Shogun? I said, well, I think the post-traumatic stress is now old enough that I can really start to feel proud and enjoy it for what it is. When you're working on something like that, it's consuming and it's difficult, and you don't really know what the product is going to be in the end. And 18 months is a long time to stay that concentrated and focused on. So taking a break from it for 2 years and not thinking about it too much. I had access to watch all 10 episodes. I watched the first 2 just feeling like I want to see it when it comes out, and I want to enjoy it with other people. And that's what we're doing now. Is every Tuesday we're watching a new episode, and it's
Same. Yeah,
beautiful.
because when I was interviewing Carlos, Disney asked me to watch all 10 episodes. And I said, but do I have to? Like, I would prefer to watch it when everyone else is watching it. So they said, that's fine. So we just did the first 3 episodes. And then I guess we're at 6 episodes now. So yeah, so you want to be able to enjoy it just like the fans are enjoying it.
And I find when I work on something, I have to, the first time I see it, I'm just looking at my work and my mistakes and, you know, picking things apart and just getting alarmed at the fact that we worked so hard on a scene and it ended up on the cutting room floor and, and no one will ever see it, all that sort of stuff. And that's the post-traumatic thing you go through. But after time, I can finally start watching it and enjoy it like anyone else would. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm watching the shows. I know what the storyline is. I know who the characters are, but I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing. So that's been fantastic.
Yeah, I've been doing like weekly streams. I didn't do one last week, but I've been doing them, and it's been really fun because each week it just gives you a chance to sort of be able to absorb everything. This is the problem we've been discussing just in the fandom, but you know, with Netflix just dumping an entire show out versus having this nice weekly thing where you can sit back and kind of go through everything and try and analyze it. It's really fun. It's almost like a puzzle, you know. But I wanted to ask you, like, compared to, because you've been doing this for, I believe, 30 years. Is that correct?
Oh, longer. I just got my 35-year pin in the mail the other day, and then 10 years in Montreal. So it's my whole adult life has been in film.
So can you compare what the experience of working on Shogun is versus working on other shows? Like, was it more challenging or stressful, or, you know, I know also because things have changed, obviously. What were your sort of feelings about working on the show?
The biggest thing when you start a new show is you have to understand the scale. And as we were going around with the producers looking at spaces to work out of and get set up in, I asked the one producer, I said, I need to know the scale. Are we dressing 200, 500, or 1,000 samurai? Like, the scale is important because that's how you gear up. That's how you do your breakdown and your labor budget and everything else about it. So scale is important, and then starting the research. And I knew going in that, one, I knew very little about Japanese history, and two, that every aspect of Japanese life is so specific in terms of its the reasoning behind it, or the ceremony, or whatever, whether it's a tea ceremony or a wedding or a funeral, or how a samurai wears his swords, whether they're vertical. Like, I was watching something on YouTube the other day. They were interviewing Frederick, the historian that advised Justin Marks on the writing of the scripts and was with us the whole show. He was on Shogun researching for 2 years for our show, working with us. And there are different ways, and he explained it. His one upset was in our period, samurai would wear the swords more vertically, so they were more difficult to draw, because if they were to draw their sword, even if they won or lost the battle, the two people would have to die. And that's pretty alarming to realize that was the commitment. If you drew your sword, it meant death for you as well. So you're either going to fight to kill the other person and end up dying for it anyways, or the other way around. But and, you know, and he talked about different swords, and the tachi, the picture you have just up, was manga. Okay, so that's his tachi sword, which is more of a regent sword, and it's worn that way because it's traditionally designed to be drawn if you're on horseback. And then he carries the tanto. So he is not carrying wakizashi and katana, and neither do the other regents. And we kind of joked about that the last time we talked. Well, Yabu has, see how theirs are arc the other way?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. And that was a decision made. Whether it's period correct or not, according to Frederick, it's not. This is more of a romanticized version of how samurai would carry swords, but they look better. And he agrees, and we are telling a story, and we are making a product for people to watch and enjoy. So there were early discussions about things like that had to be decided. Do all the women have blackened teeth? No. You know, that was decided. You know, why do you want Mariko to have black teeth?
Yeah.
It's not going to go well. So
yeah, it's funny because I was just watching the old what do you call it? Dune, and all the Bene Gesserit have black teeth, and I was trying to figure out what that was all about. So maybe that's what the inspiration was there. See, I didn't even know that until you pointed it out. So the beautiful white pearls would have not be historically accurate then.
Not if you're married.
Not if you're married. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So you were telling me a little bit how you got involved, like from the point that you got hired, like how much research did you have to do? Like what was your pre-production stage? Like Carlos was telling me they were doing all these Zoom calls, weekly Zoom calls. Was that sort of your process as well?
We had that process, and we also had people in Japan that I had Osaka-san, who's a retired prop master in Japan. He's in Kyoto. We went through a producer that originally was on the Shogun project when it was supposed to be done in Japan. And he was in on the Zoom meetings with me as well. I would read a script. I would do my breakdown. I'd highlight in yellow the things I wanted to talk to Osaka-san about, and then I'd get them translated. And Osaka went to, what's the name of it? Takatsu is a prop rental in Kyoto. And Kyoto is a big studio where Kurosawa has done all his films, and Kyoto is known for its period films, period. Okay, so their rental house had the best Tachi sword collections and things. You can't buy a reproduction Tachi sword today. You can buy katanas and wakasashis all day long, but very, very hard to find good quality reproduction Tachi swords. So they had them, and Osaka he pulled a number of swords for the regions, in particular for Toranaga, and the producer was friends with Hiro, and they met at Takatsu with him to show him the swords, and he made the choice, well, let's send them all so that when I see what Carlos is going to put me in, I can make a choice. And part of that was I was being criticized because they wanted to own everything. And I'm going, look, if I can't look Hiro in the eye and honestly tell him that these swords came from Takatsu and they're as good as we can find and they're the best and you've seen them before you got here, if I couldn't have that credibility, then I was never going to earn his credit or his trust, right? Mm-hmm. So it's decisions like that you have to make as you go along. And when it comes to the researching, yes, I had books and books and books on samurai. Did I have time to read them? No. But my on-set guys did. And when they started, I just went into their office and I said, look, I need help. There is so much to learn here, and I'm not going to get it all. So you guys have got to deal with these books and deal with these samurai and get it dialed in. I can get the parts, I can get the pieces, but tying them on them every day on set, you have to learn that. You need to know everything. And you just have to share the work. Same with the food stylists. We found a chef that had taught at a culinary school in Japan. It was Michelin rated. He was living in Vancouver, retired. He was doing community work at some old folks home, making meals. And through the Japanese Cultural Center, they suggested we contact him. And he researched all the foods because he could, and he did. And he was the principal chef for putting all the looks together. And I wish I could share my slides because I.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we were having some technical problems. But, I have one picture of your. I do have one picture though of your tea setup. Here I have this one here of all the.
That was the biggest, most complicated meal scene we had to do on the whole show. This hasn't even aired yet. This one.
Oh, is that okay that I'm showing it?
Oh, it's out of context. It's not on the set, and there he is down at the end of the table, tweaking things. But everything had to be imported from Japan. The snapper fish that we get from Japan are quite small, and there's a technique through bamboo that you skewer it, so it's got a little S in it when it's cooked. And those and crayfish, because of course Japanese crayfish are smaller and they don't have the claws like lobsters do here. So all of that had to be air freighted in from Japan. And the
Wow.
gold foil that he was sprinkling over some of the, just for detail. The script said, "Food better than anything served at the palace." And we had 28 people in that room. 28. There was Toranaga and his brother, and the rest were other samurai, right? And so each seating had 2 of these tables, little lacquer tables, with all of the food on the 2 tables. So
Yeah, those little lacquer tables are sort of like a precursor to a TV tray.
Yeah.
You're sitting on the floor.
It took months to find the you can't get matching, but you can get them within the same color and design pattern sort of thing. To get 56 of them was a challenge enough. Now think of the multiples you need for the resets
Mhm.
and the bowls and the cups and everything with it, and make it all look authentic. And even these foreground pieces are all sake serving pots.
Yep.
Each one of these is 3,000 to 6,000 US a piece. Buying them out of antique
Oh my gosh.
in Japan. It was, and you had on my desk, I had all 10 scripts. If you ever go into Lordco or some parts place, they have these parts catalog racks on their bench when you walk in. That's how my scripts were organized, from 1 to 10. And you needed to know every inch of those inside and out as you were prepping and buying and exploring. It took sometimes forever to finally find something like an incense clock or something like that.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the incense clock, so there's a really great behind the scenes, like TikTok, I guess, video that FX put out of you. I shared it on Instagram, but I'll put a link to it in the description below. That was really fascinating. So the how they would tell the time. I mean, some of these things are crazy. So do you want to talk a little bit about the incense clock? I don't have it in my questions, but
My criticism of that is, why didn't I take the top off and show the pattern instead of talk about it? Like,
oh no! I thought it was really, really cool because you had it's like a grate, and then each of it comes out of each section of the grate to tell you what time it is.
There's a depth to that, and when you take the top off of the incense clock, there's a depth to it. You fill in rice husk ash, which is white. You tamp it down perfectly. There's little tamping tools and everything that come with it. And then there's a piece, it's like a stamp that you press into this. And that gives you the labyrinth now that you have to fill carefully with the incense, just powdered incense. It's not on sticks or anything. You powder all that in, you make it all level, and you tamp that all down. And then you light the one end and it starts smoldering and burning. You put your lid back on, and there might be in one show a time lapse where you see the smoke moving up through the different holes in the lattice of the top of the incense clock as the passage of time.
It's so incredible.
Yeah, so you have 12-hour incense clocks, 24-hour, and quite often it was sort of a debate whether the regents would have one. You would definitely see them in temples, but this is Osaka, and this is not just one region. This is the council. This is a pretty important thing. So yes, they would have an incense clock.
So cool. And the other thing you showed in the video is the stamps. Like we have a lot of writing documents, stamping documents. I was saying, I just love those scenes. They're just so beautiful because, the way they're sitting and the little tables they have. And so you said you used existing stamps, but then you changed the seals up. Is that what you did?
Yeah, that was another whole research, was just trying to find unique hand-carved stamps that were in the color palettes of the different regions, and also whatever character or carving was that related somehow to them, and then had them resurfaced, have the old carving ground down and recarved with our region's symbols. And so there was no fooling around. I mean, we went all out to do that, to make it proof. The paper is all handmade paper. The calligraphy, Carlos had a woman that had come from Japan as a kimono costumer.
Thanks, Cassie.
But she's an international award-winning calligrapher, like very highly regarded in Japan. Without her, we wouldn't have had those documents. And then using the old Japanese of the period versus modern Japanese is another thing.
Oh.
And she being able to study different characteristics of a character and create individual styles of handwriting for them, it was fantastic. It was just a massive, or every episode we had documents. And you're not doing one document, and you can't put it in the photocopier and like print 20 more.
No, of course.
Her and then
she must have developed carpal tunnel from doing all of those, right? Is it on rice paper?
It is a handmade paper. There's some really neat YouTube videos of it. It's all dissolved in the vat of water, and there are men all around the room with these giant screens, and they dip it into this surly type of water and then pull it out and let it drain, and then take it over and let it dry out. And whether it's rice or rice husk, or I would have to look. There's fiber in it. It's very strong paper. It's very structured that way.
There's actually a beautiful Japanese paper store in Toronto. I don't know if you've ever been to it. I used to go there, and they have like, oh my God. I mean, I'm sure it's not the old style. I'm sure it's a modern technique, but yeah, a lot of them have like beautiful textures and prints and things like that. So it's probably really nice to actually write on. It's probably like lovely. How long does it take to dry though? Do you have to hang them to dry, or how did that work?
We just laid them out on tables. And the packages we'd get, I don't know how many we went through and how much the packages were. I'd have to go back and look. It was not cheap. It was handmade paper for calligraphy, period. And that it was worth a fortune. That's all I can tell you.
And what kind of ink would they have used?
Oh, it's ground. It comes as a hard stick, and you put water in your little tray.
Oh, okay.
With like a soapstone material, and it has some. It doesn't have a grit to it. It's just by the nature of the stone itself. It's like a sharpening stone idea, right? You just start grinding the stick with the water to make your ink. And that's the other thing, is the ink is never exactly the same in terms of how dark it is, and you'll get changes in ink depending on who made the ink or at what point. Even in Blackthorn's diaries, we did the same thing.
I was going to ask you, now I had Carlos on here, and by the way, he just loves you. You guys were like, you sounded like quite the team together. So I know you worked closely with the wardrobe department, but what other departments would a prop master also work with, and how did that all work?
We work a lot with special effects. Work a lot, not so much on Shogun, but usually like on Tron right now, I'm working a lot with visual effects, because I'm things in 3D models, and I'm transferring those over to the VFX for their post-productions, or they're not rendering them. They're already step models. They could just push print and make their own if they wanted to. And stunts, deal a lot with stunts, especially on Shogun. And on Shogun, the wranglers, because all the horses were all the tack on the horses, we had to go and put all that on. And work with them.
Pictures of well, at least what's the tack? Is that the kit that goes on the horse?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's well, this is going to bring me to my next question, unless you haven't finished answering the question yet.
A lot of departments.
A lot of departments.
It's not a department that, hair and makeup, probably the least amount, but yeah, stunts, special effects, visual effects, set deck, costumes, art department.
Actually, let me ask you this question first. So in terms of who do you report to mostly? Like who do you get your marching orders from? Is it the showrunners? Is there someone above you who says, okay, here, or do you just take the script and break it down and you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing? Like, how does that all work in your process?
Well, in early pre-production, in those weekly meetings in the boardroom with all the heads of department or HODs, we get the marching orders from Justin, who goes over the next script that we're talking about. And then we'll go off, do our breakdowns, come back with our research, our comments, our concerns. There's decisions being made as we go along through that process. At the same time, we're acquiring things, building things, repairing things, and then there comes a point a few days before we go to camera where we have a final production meeting. We have the location survey. We go to the sites we'll be filming at, and then typically there's a prop show and tell with the director, and Justin would be there, Ed, one of the producers, Helen Jarvis, production designer, and I would show them what I'm bringing to the party.
Mm-hmm. Is that when the panic sets in? That would be me. I'd be like, oh my God, I wouldn't be sleeping the night before. But you've been doing this for years, so obviously.
That panic was way months earlier
on prep,
as things were starting to, the scale was starting to really hit me pretty hard. What we were doing and what we were taking on. And yeah, I wouldn't envy that on anyone. It's really wears on you. The 2:30 in the morning, I call it the death roll. When you wake up and you're right away, my brain starts going, because if I get up, I can get in touch with Japan right now. And I just wake up because I was worried about something, and I can get in touch with Tomo before he starts his day. And it's just, yeah, it's.
So by the time you've gotten to your show and tell, you're kind of like, okay, I've sort of have dealt with most of these challenges. But do you ever have a situation where the showrunner was like, oh, no, that wasn't what I was expecting. Like, what is this?
No.
Or do they trust you?
For the most part, they trusted everyone who have done their job. And that is the celebration of Shogun. If it is a success, is the collaboration that all of our departments took to do the best we could with this show. It isn't always that way. And when it is that way, it's you get what you get, really, in the end. And we are all among us, as we Facebook and Instagram and like each other's posts and everything else. We are so proud.
That's awesome.
Of what we've accomplished. Sana and her hair, there's a nice effects interview with her.
Oh, I saw it. It's really good.
With her and makeup. Those people they worked so hard.
I was teasing Carlos because for his behind the scenes, which, by the way, I want to say I was so thrilled to see all of the departments featured the way they were, because oftentimes on shows like this, they aren't. And also the way that all of you have shouted out your team. I just like Carlos just did a shout out today. And I just love that. I think that's amazing that you're sharing this isn't just me. I worked with all of these wonderful people. I think that's amazing.
Well, I mentioned that the last time we talked is first day of filming, we were at Manatee Bay, which was lower Anjero, and it was a huge day. We had 300 background, and it was the first day with the boats on the beach, and one of our first sets dressed, and Helen's artwork, and you just stand there and you look and you go, we did it.
I have a picture here of the beach.
It is. It's kind of so emotional. All of our departments are being represented there in that shot. And if one department had fallen short, we wouldn't have that shot, whether it's hair or makeup or the weapons or the costumes or the scenery or the boats or the atmosphere, special effects in the background created. It's everything, right? And it takes an army to do one of these.
Absolutely. Now, the one thing I was mentioning to you earlier is, W.C. Fields, he coined the phrase, never work with children or animals. I mean, there are some young people, I have maybe a baby, but there are a lot of animals. So how does that work? Like, obviously the falconing and things you have the props for that, but how does that work? Do you also work with the wranglers? I think you were mentioning that you had to with the horses.
Wranglers and the falconer, we had to work, because there were times we had to rehearse with Hiro, and the glove that he's wearing is handmade by the president of falconry in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Stitched. I can remember what it cost, but I probably won't tell you. And everything else, the little thing you spin around and throw to draw the falcon back to you, that came from Japan. All the little bits for the falconry came from Japan, from the Falconry Society and the president who built them all.
And then, sorry, go ahead.
The saddles.
Yeah, there's a saddle there.
I've got one on my little slideshow that I took apart. These are in 4 pieces. You have the front, the back, and then you have these two pieces in the middle that are laced and notched into those pieces. And one of these broke because they were old, and I took it apart, and underneath was hand carved into the bottom of it. It said March, lucky day, 1634, and the name of the maker.
That's absolutely crazy. I do remember when you were on last time, you were saying, but it started raining and some of these things you were like, oh my gosh, they're getting wet. Like we have to cover. There's a lot of rain during, by the way, there's a lot of rain in the show. Is that natural Vancouver rain, or is that like done with a rain machine?
Oh, there were days it was raining and it wasn't enough rain, and then effects had to put more rain on the scene for the continuity. But we had that year, we had, I don't know how many atmospheric rainstorms that were just deluge, flooding. It took out the valley. Like Chilliwack was flooded. It was under 4 feet of water. One of the dikes broke or washed out.
Oh,
flooded,
wow.
and took out the Coquihalla Highway. There was one point where Vancouver didn't have a single road or railway track connecting it to the rest of Canada.
Yeah, no, I remember hearing that on the news.
Yeah, we were working in the middle of that.
That's crazy. Yeah, because Carlos was telling me, because I said, oh, it must have gotten kind of humid and stuff. And he says, no, actually, it was really cold because you were shooting basically over the winter.
Correct.
And until the spring, and then maybe you had a little bit warmer weather. But basically, he was saying the cast were thankful that the costumes were warm because, you didn't have to do. Now, you guys though would have had to just wear your, I don't know, your parkas, like.
On some nights, guys on set would probably go through 3 sets of Gore-Tex, like full, the pants, the jacket. Your Gore-Tex, typically in heavy rain like that, will at best last 4 hours. And because your equipment is work equipment and a little older, it doesn't last very long.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Now, we talked a little bit about the eating and drinking, and actually, okay, can I ask you, in the last episode, maybe you can tell me what's going on here. I couldn't quite figure it out. There was a lot of stuff going on with the cup, where the woman who runs the brothel, that's probably not the correct name, sorry, she keeps putting the cup down, and they keep making a thing about the cup. Is there something going on there with the cups that you're not supposed to put it on the floor? Do you know what I'm talking about in the last episode?
The one I'm thinking about is Blackthorn drinking with Mariko's husband.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, he empties his vessel and pours the sake in it.
Well, the sake cups are so tiny.
They're tiny, exactly. Yeah.
Sake are so small, and he says this isn't how a man drinks. So he takes his soup bowl and chucks the soup and fills the soup bowl with sake. And now they're running back and forth to the kitchen, getting more and more sake. They go through 8 bottles of sake in the script, in the scene. I don't know how many we went through, but and so Montero has to meet his challenge when he gets drunk, and now he's upset, and now he's going to pick up his bow and fire that arrow and past her face, and
that was awful. Yeah,
and into a post out in the yard, and then he loads a second arrow and puts it right through the same hole. As drunk as he was, that was proving his competence as a samurai in terms of his marksmanship, right?
Yeah, now I know that bow, I think that you made that bow, if I understand correctly, and it's in the promo shots, but obviously the arrow was done by special effects, I'm understanding, right? Though. Now, did you make that bow, or did you find, I can't remember what you told me about that.
With umi bows like that, they're layered. There's layers of bamboo that are laminated up and set in a form. And anytime you fire a bow dry without an arrow, you have a good chance of the bow breaking. Like a crossbow will explode, or a compound bow will explode if you don't de-rig it and make it so you can dry fire it. So the bow he used had been broken already in another scene where it blew up. But there was enough of the bow left that I was able to buy like a deep sea fishing rod, the end of it, and it has those big rings on it. And I fastened that to the top of the bow and ran the line from the bottom of the bow up through that and anchored it. So when he pulled it, it was the fishing rod out of camera that was bending and taking up the slack. Oh,
okay.
And that was the only way we could get it the way he wanted to shoot it. And it was, we were he was shooting it the next day, and you think about all kinds of different things you're trying to build and rig and play around with, and the fishing rod thing just was a big light bulb moment. And we showed it to him the next day, and he's perfect.
Yeah.
Because he can do the full draw and not be concerned about it.
It was amazing. Yeah. Now, I have a few questions from people in the audience. Do you mind if I post those?
Sure.
There's nothing scary. Sarah asked, did you work with North American suppliers like the Kyoto Arts and Antiques Warehouse in Seattle?
No, there was one in California that we worked with. He was originally in New York. He had a retail outlet, and then he had an online store. And he moved to California, and this was when the ship in the Suez Canal got stuck, and he had 5 containers that were on their way from Japan to California that he was waiting for. And in the meantime, he had done this move and realized he wasn't going to open a retail store anymore. So all this stuff arrived, and we started talking to him, and he's sending us pictures, and I hired somebody in LA to go out to his warehouse and look at it all. And between set deck, we ended up buying like a 5-ton truck full from him.
Wow.
He said, well, look, it's not worth me photographing it and putting it online for what it's worth. So I'll just give you for what I paid for it. So it really helped him. And it was during the COVID and all the other stuff that was going on, he was grateful for the money, and we were super grateful and stoked that he was willing to deal with us.
Yeah. And then I guess whatever surplus you had after, you could just sell off or what have you, or keep it.
Everything has been inventoried, manifested, boxed up, put in crates. It's now moved to its second warehouse location. All the set dressing, all Carlos, all the costumes, all the props, all the boats, all the Norimonos, everything is sitting in a warehouse. Kind
of like Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Like floor to ceiling. Actually, Cassie asks, sorry, Cassie, I've lost. She asked this question. I don't know if you know it. She says, with shifts in breeding genetics, do you have to consider the breeds lines of animals that are used in accuracy?
We're aware of it. Like, for example, the samurai horses were not the type of horses we had on Shogun. They were quite a bit smaller.
Okay.
But yeah, that horse doesn't exist in North America, and we weren't going to get it. And they look more majestic than a taller horse, so people were fine with that.
Yeah, you have to make some concessions.
The falcon is distinct for Japan, and that the falconer we had raises them, breeds them, so that was accurate.
Yeah. The other, actually, it was funny. Sorry, I've lost the comments here. Who was it that said this? This is pretty funny. When you were talking about the rain, Natural Selection says Canada wet instead of Canada dry. That's really good. Left Coast Graphics is asking, how much of this series was actually filmed in the city I grew up in, Port Moody?
All of Osaka Harbor. And the gates into Osaka Castle. Anytime there are big gates and marches and they're in those stone walls, that's in Port Moody at, what was it called? It used to be a sawmill.
Oh, okay.
And it had been closed for a number of years, and it was a big backlot just waiting for something to happen. And it had a man-made inlet where we had our harbor and built all the smaller retail stores and ship supply businesses and everything closer to the harbor. So that was all Port Moody. There's another part. It's a location. It's called the Swiss Gun Club. Maybe this person has heard of that. It's owned by, you have to be Swiss to be a member, and I guess we have a lot of Swiss here in Vancouver. And it's a gun club, and they have Olympic athletes that train up there. But they lease their land to us for making some of another village somewhere between Manatee Bay and Lower Angero and Upper Angero.
Oh, Cassie is added your Instagram. Yes, thank you. I also put it in the description below. If you guys go over and follow Dean on Instagram, that's great. And he has a lot of his new movie he's working on. By the way, Dean, before we finish up with Shogun, I was going to tell you, when I first met my husband, we went on a date and then I looked at his DVD collection and he had Tron, the original, in his DVD collection. So I was like, this is a good one. You're a keeper. And Blade Runner. So yeah, that sort of sealed the deal for me.
Nice.
Yeah. And this is the third one though, I think, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah. All right. So
that's the funny thing. Every time I get called to do Tron 3 at producers, when they called me, it was like March 2022 and I'm still on Shogun. And I said, this is the third time you phoned me to do Tron 3 because it keeps getting pushed or canceled or
yeah. And you're like, I said yes last time. Well, I mean, unless there was a scheduling issue, I think you were, still on it. And are you done though? Are you still working on it, or is it in post-production?
We have another month.
Okay.
We didn't go to camera until mid-January this year, and that was not part of my plan. We were supposed to be done before Christmas, or December, but because of the strikes and writer strikes, it pushed it in 2004.
Okay.
And end of January, I turned 69, and I'm looking at them going like, this isn't fair. Like, you promised me I'd be finished this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Jeff Bridges is in it, I assume?
I can't comment on that.
Oh, you can't? Oh, okay. All right. I can't remember what happened at the end of the second one. So I have to go back and rewatch it.
I've had to be a part of a lot of press visits, being the international ones, and then the North American ones, and then there have been influencers brought in as well. And Leanne Muldoon is our publicist, and there are certain things that we don't talk about, and that's one of them.
You don't talk about Fight Club, and you don't talk about Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
All right. So before we finish up, I just was going to ask you about the guns, because I know we talked, just the weapons. You mentioned the katanas. I don't know. I don't have an understanding of Japanese weapons that much, but do you work with like a props master, or are you the props master? And then do you have to have like a gun, because of all the stuff that's been going on lately on sets? Like, do you have to have someone come in, like a consultant? Like, how does that all work?
We have armorers, which are not part of the union. I'll be honest, years ago when I would do smaller shows and take the show to the floor, do it myself. And if we had firearms, I'd handle them. I have a business firearms license that I've had for 35 years. I have 2 levels of safety training that have been organized through the IA. I've had all these years of experience. There's been shows I've been specifically hired for, like iRobot, which was Will Smith, for my background in firearms and being safe with them, because the director had directed The Crow and we know what happened there. So the studio was really concerned. Or Halle Berry on Catwoman, same thing. Mark Wahlberg on Shooter. I mean, those are very specific, and that's the work of a prop master. It's in my job description. I am responsible for the safety and handling of firearms on the film set.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, because it's funny, because then there's a new Crow coming out. But yeah, no, I was just wondering, with all the stuff that's been going on, if you have to have, like, I don't know, I don't understand the rules behind all of that. But is there a special extra level of protection now that they have, aside from putting that responsibility on you?
You have to understand that there's been 3 people die from gunshot in North America in the last 100 years. Okay. And the last 2 were with revolvers, which is interesting, because revolvers are the only weapons we use that we don't use constrictors in, because you just have a blank in a cylinder and it fires out the end, and a lot of wax or whatever comes out. So I find that interesting, like a Western gun, and then on the Crow, it was a revolver. And it's also where these films are done. In both cases, they were low budget. A lot of the stuff on Rust is being blamed on the producers for creating the situation and hiring inexperienced crew and giving them too many jobs, multiple jobs, instead of giving them the amount of crew they should have had. Like the armor, I think it was their father is very well known as a Western armor and so. But there's I've worked in the States. I've worked in states where it's legal to carry. You have grips and electrics showing up to work, and first thing they do is take their gun and holster off and put it in the cubby on the truck, and then the first thing they put on before they drive home is that back on their person. They get in their car, see you tomorrow. And there's a different, just a different approach or feeling. Somehow down there, blanks aren't dangerous. So they do a lot of different things that we don't do here. And on my business firearms license, there is a page and a paragraph that specifically talks about live ammunition. And if I'm on a show and I get caught conveying weapons to work, and they find in my car live ammunition or a weapon that isn't related to the work I'm doing, i.e. personally my own, I lose my license and I go to jail. I lose, that license is gone for life. I'll never get it back.
Mm-hmm.
There is no live ammunition on set. There are rules where we can work with live ammunition, but their protocols are so strict. I've only done it once. And you literally, it's like working at USAMRIID and dealing with viruses that'll, create plagues and things. You never let those two parts come together. So if I have a live fire on set, that person comes to set with their equipment and their guns marked, and they go straight to the special effects truck. They do not come near the prop truck.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, everything on the prop truck is all set up and ready for blank firing. And that's what we work with. And you never cross. And say at Russ, the problem was it was crossing the line all the time. She was taking actors out into the desert and loading live rounds into the same prop guns and letting them shoot pop cans and then go back to work and take those same guns back onto set. You're just asking for trouble when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a strict control and a mindset that you just, if you're dealing with that sort of stuff, you take it as so serious.
Mm-hmm. And then in the swords, like I was watching like a behind the scenes, like I guess for rehearsal, you have different swords that you would use for a rehearsal versus like what you would use on set kind of thing. Like, are there different levels? Like you have wood or you have rubber, or how does that all work for different or background?
We like, for everyday sword that they're all wearing, they're all bamboo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the blades are bamboo. We
Mm-hmm.
paint them black and then go over them with a chrome paint and hand finish them.
Oh, that's excellent. And because they're usually sheathed anyway, I guess, right? Yeah. So, okay.
And for a safety thing, a lot of them, if they're on and off a horse, they're breaking them because they get hung up, and it's bamboo. It snaps, mm-hmm. and it takes a second to pull one pin and put a new blade in, and away you go. It's not the end of the world. The Tachi swords came with their real blades from the rental house, but also bamboo blades as well from Japan. Very rare would a real sword be on set, especially mm-hmm. a sharp sword. And the only time we did that was that scene, again, with the bow and the arrow and Bontero getting drunk, when he chops through the screen and sinks the sword into the post, the pillar in the house. Mm-hmm. That had to be really worked out, seriously worked out with stunts. And for example, there's as much as you trust the strength of that blade, because it's made of carbon steel and flexible steel and everything else, it could hit that post and be fine. Or if he hits it in a glancing blow and snaps the blade, the end of the blade goes flying someplace and you have no control over it. So mm-hmm. there was talk about a cameraman being on the other side of the Soji screen when this sword was supposed to come through and sink into the post. And it was like, no, not happening.
Wow.
You can do a lock off. That's fine. But no mm-hmm. operator on that side of the room. That side of the whole set is no go until mm-hmm. it's done.
It's funny, you're reminding me when you were talking about the bamboo, because in A Knight's Tale, I think they used spaghetti when they were doing the joust. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah. Well,
like for the splintering, they used spaghetti. And I thought that was so clever, Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. Okay. So I know you were saying that there is a giant warehouse that has all the stuff, like it's all cataloged and saved. And I kind of was poking at Carlos a bit to ask, is there a possibility of a tour? Are you allowed to say anything? Perhaps there might be a tour.
I haven't heard mention of a tour or a second season, to tell you mm-hmm. the truth.
Okay.
I mean, on some of the press junkets, I know they went into the warehouse and pulled certain costume and props and set deck pieces to dress the stages with, and that stuff may still be scattered all over the place. But
yeah, and then and even a season 2. So because there is a series of books, perhaps. Like I think that they did. I'm not 100% sure, but I thought that they did do a Taipan in the 80s, but maybe I'm wrong. So you don't even know if there could possibly be, because this is I haven't seen the whole show, but I'm assuming it's a standalone season. That's it. So if they were to do perhaps the second season, it would be of a different book. But you have no understanding or knowledge of that, I guess.
the only stuff I heard talking about was if there were a second season, it would be more entering the Edo period as Toranaga becomes shogun, and seeing the difference in terms of culturally how Japan changed as the warring stopped and peace took over. That exploring that side, but I know Justice started to be involved in it and it has stopped, and I don't know if that's because he just wants to move on and do something different, or I'm at the wrong pay grade to know those.
Yeah, I've talked to some other creators, and they were saying that they actually like the idea of it being a limited series. That would be it. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's all a nice package, and then we move on. But now, and also, have you heard anything about how the reception, what it's been like in Japan for the show? I mean, obviously, Western audiences really connect with it.
Since this Shogun has started coming out, a lot of people that were from Japan and working on Shogun here in Vancouver have reached out, and now we're on Instagram or Facebook and things like that. It has been really well received in Japan.
That's wonderful.
It's you hear the actors talking about it, and the level of detail and how everyone works so hard to make things so accurate, and it is a real, I think they finally feel like they're being represented in culturally in a way that has been so lacking for so long as there's been entertainment out there in the world, kind of thing. And that makes me very happy, very proud.
Yeah. And I know, obviously Hiro Sonata's, a huge success, but Anna, she's in another show, Monarch, and Cosmo Jarvis. I think I saw he's just been picked up for a new show. So I think the cast are going to go on to do really, really well. By the way, Blackthorn it was weird because at the beginning I'd read that he was in an article that he was kind of the least interesting of the characters, but I have to say I actually find him to be incredibly fascinating as a character. I know in the original book he's the central character, but they've tried to flesh out the Japanese characters. But what do you think? Who's your favorite character in the show? Sorry, I didn't have this in the questions, but
Cosmos.
Yeah, he's great, huh?
We had a lot of talks. That opening scene in the first episode where he's on the deck of the ship and doing a sounding with the lead.
Yeah.
He approached me with that. His dad is a navigator. And
I think you mentioned that, and you are as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My sailing background and all that. And he talked about this lead sounding weight, and I researched into it, and it's true. They would take the lead weight, and it was hollow in the bottom, and they would fill it full of lard. Okay. And they would throw it off, and as it hit at 30 fathoms or whatever, they would bring it up, and stuck in the lard would be evidence of what's down below, and that would go into their rooters, their logs.
It's so interesting.
So with Blackthorn getting one of the Portuguese rooters off a ship and reading in there, when you're approaching Japan's at 30 meters, you will find white sand. That is where he goes down, and the captain's sitting there dying of scurvy and all that, and tells him, dumps the sand on the table. We're near Japan. We've made it. And he says, maybe you've made it, but I'm not. And Blackthorn has to leave him his snap lock pistol and go up on deck and listen to the sound of it going on. So
I didn't get this one question in for you. Let me just ask you before I let you go. So I think I mentioned that I love the litter. I was trying to figure out what it was called like for ages. And then finally I saw someone do a breakdown and called it a litter. It's so beautiful. And did you build that, the litter in the show?
The ones that are carried around on the long pole?
Yes.
Those are called a Norimono.
Oh, okay. So maybe the litter is just a medieval term for it.
Well, there's
A Norimono. Okay.
Okay, so I had one from Takatsu that was an
Okay.
antique, and that was the one I was freaking out in the rainstorm that it was going to get ruined. And then
Mhm.
I bought one through Tomo that was a reproduction that came from Japan. So I started out with two, and then on the auctions I bought three more that were really from the Edo period, and you could tell by the roof line and things. So after we finished the first episode, and I realized we were in trouble if we kept going the way we were going. One of my builders took one of these Norimonos apart, changed the roof line, put the hinges in so it opened up, made the sliding doors. We had the silk, we had this, go to set that. We got some of the brass gold plated stuff to trim them with, and we started making our own out of what were three other Edo Norimonos that we refurbished. So we ended up with like the Norimono parking lot. It was like Uber. What do you want this week? And we'd change the blinds. We would change the lining on the inside. So when the doors was open, it was something else. And
And how small? Like, have you sat in one of them?
I'm 6'2" and 200.
Oh, okay. So how small are they?
They're tiny.
Yeah. So Hero was able to get in okay though. He's I think 5'7" or so.
Yeah, that was the modern one that we bought, and that
so you did make it a bit bigger.
Yeah. Yes.
I loved it, and is it kind of like a lacquer? Like it's so shiny, what kind of
a lacquer?
It is a lacquer, yeah. Anyway, I thought that was cool. Now what's your favorite prop though in the show, or do you have one? Is that unfair to ask you?
I'm really proud of the horse tack.
Yeah.
Something we didn't talk about at all, and that was in the episode with the cannons that Blackthorn was.
Oh, I was going to ask you about the cannons. Yes.
Okay, I'm really disappointed they didn't insert what the cannonballs look like, because we did a lot of research behind that. When Tornaga's son attacks and does that thing, ambushes those guys, right? And you just see them ripped to shreds. That wasn't done with a cannonball. Cannonballs are just a big chunk of cast metal. They don't blow up when they hit like a bombshell. But what Blackthorn would have known, and from ship battles, they do something far different. They start with one. It's a cannonball cut in half and held together with chain. And they load that, and it windmills through the air into a ship and takes out rigging and all kinds of stuff. It does an amazing amount of damage. But they even go one further, because the Brits are like that. There was another one called, I think it's called a spider ball. You take a ring, steel ring will fit down the barrel of the cannon, and you fix 6 lengths of chain to it, and you throw that down the barrel, and then let that go, and that thing whips through the air like a saw blade, and that's what they use as an anti-personnel round.
Oh my God, that is so violent.
Well, and you see the violence when people are just cut to shreds when the hits, right?
Yeah, and those. By the way, did you have to do all the body gore as well? Is there a company that you go to buy gore?
Yeah.
There is. Yeah.
Dapper Cadaver.
It's called Abracadaver?
No, Dapper Cadaver.
Oh, Dapper Cadaver. Oh my Lord.
And
that is crazy.
They're good. They're affordable, and they can send you a posable body or parts of bodies, and so I just went through the menu and pick and chose things.
The menu. Did they call it a menu? That's hilarious.
Do I need legs? Do I need a head? Do I need a...
Yeah. And then you're there with like vats of blood, I guess. Like you've got like your buckets of blood, or your jars of like all your different kinds of blood, I suppose.
And then
that must have been a fun day.
All the chunky stuff you have to throw in there to mix up.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. Do you enjoy that kind of thing?
Yeah.
It's kind of fun. I love horror movies. Like my husband always laughs at me because I love horror and gore movies, and I say I find it relaxing. I don't know what it is about it. Other shows will give me anxiety, but something about horror movies, I don't know. I always sort of enjoy them.
You ever see 13 Ghosts?
Oh yeah. Did you work on that?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm a huge horror fan. So, but also sci-fi. So I'm really looking forward to Tron. So now you're wrapped with Tron. Are you working on anything else? Or you say, hey man, I'm going to retire now. I've done what I need to do. What do you have coming up?
I'm retiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe write a script about your maybe perhaps working on a script of your book.
I've written one book already, and I don't tend to write about the industry so much as write for the sake of writing. So,
But you have a story you wrote about sailing, and maybe you thought you might make that into a screenplay.
yeah, it's into a screenplay, and I have a producer. And
Okay, you do. Okay, there you go. So you
it's
have
called
a
Dreammaker. That's why I'm
yes.
Dreammaker YVR. And it's 1948 fiction. It takes place in Nova Scotia. The lead character is Daniel Tanner. Tanner is actually a name of a family that exists in Lunenburg to this day.
Mhm.
And
And if, for those who don't know, that's where the Blue Nose, I believe, was made.
correct.
Was in Lunenburg. I've been on the Blue Nose 2.
Yeah.
The second one. Well, you should do it, and then you probably have colleagues down in Nova Scotia who you can call on to work on the show for you, and Carlos will come in and do wardrobe and
It'd be perfect.
yeah. Oh, by the way, he's doing Alien. I'm gonna have to go see that. That's going to be amazing.
Alien did that in Budapest last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So lots of wonderful. So everyone. So Carlos, who did the costumes on this, is doing Alien Romulus, and Dean is going to be doing Tron 3, perhaps with or without Jeff Bridges. We don't know. It's going to be a mystery. Well, Dean, I just want to thank you so much for coming and spending like Easter Sunday with me. Like, thank you so much. And I can hear your birds chirping there. So that's really cool. You have obviously a beautiful spot, but you were telling me that you're moving. So if anyone's stalking Dean, he's not going to be where you're going to be arriving in the next week or so, or, month, because he's going to be moving somewhere else to an undisclosed location.
I wish it was tropical and sunny, but it's not.
But anyway, so thanks so much for coming, and thanks everyone in the chat for showing up. I meant to say hello to Alicia. Hi, Alicia. Thanks, Cassie, for posting all of those links. We really appreciate it. And everyone have a wonderful day. Take care.
Maybe I'll start posting some of the ones I wanted to show today, pics.
Yes, and
loading those up on Instagram because I'm
absolutely, and then I'll share those out.
all right.
Okay, thanks, guys. Take care now. Bye.
Bye-bye.